John Butler, would you care to come up?
I can't believe they're letting me talk twice in one meeting. I was thrilled before, I'm thrilled again. Our guest speaker today is fellow Vietnam veteran Virginia Lee, Jenny Dornheggen. Jenny is a former U.S. Army First Lieutenant who served in Vietnam caring for severely wounded soldiers as an intensive care nurse in the 67th Evacuation Hospital in Vietnam. At a time when few women served in combat, Jenny prevailed as a soldier, nurse, and leader. As the subject of several publications chronicling her military and civilian service working with veterans suffering from physical and mental wounds for 4+ decades, she continues to serve well beyond the battlefield. After leaving military service in Vietnam, she was awarded the Bronze Star for serving in a combat zone. For the ensuing 41 years, Jenny has been active in civilian nursing as well as being a member of Reynolds Veterans Association, or the RVA, since 2004, supporting rehabilitation and healthcare facilities for present and former members of the U.S. Armored Forces. Since 2014, Jenny has served on a scholarship committee credited with presenting 35 student scholarships on behalf of the RVA. She also speaks to veterans groups, sharing her war experiences and personal battle in coping with post-traumatic stress. She was our first pandemic presenter for our very first all-remote meeting in May of 2020, and we didn't know what we didn't know, but we got through it. And we still today get people send messages to YouTube how much they enjoy just having first time listen to her talk then. She also presented in person to the Atlanta Senior Care Network organization I'm part of at our annual Veterans Day focus meeting last November. Jenny was inducted into the 2024 Military Veterans Hall of Fame last fall on November the 2nd in Columbus, Georgia. She's been married for 51 years to David Dornheggen, a retired hospital administrator. They have 2 children and 3 grandkids. She lives in Eatonton, Georgia, near Lake Oconee. Jenny, thank you.
Well, it is hard to believe that it's been 5 years since I spoke to all of you, and what you're going to see today is very similar to what I presented a long time ago, but you were only looking at it in a little box like this. So hopefully the photos will be a little bit more pronounced to you, obviously. Some of them are a little gruesome, so just know it's part of being in war. So thank you so much for having me. Now I'm going to go live with you. It's always a pleasure to speak to fellow veterans, as we have a special bond. We were in Vietnam together, whether it was the same year or not. We always carry the war with us, no matter whether we want to or not. When you've been in war, it's there with you. So, okay. Well, that's a different picture. Did you do that, Skip? Okay. I was born and raised in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I came from a very, very patriotic family. My dad was in World War II. My uncle was. My other uncle was in Korea. I was a Girl Scout. And let me tell you, talk about patriotic. I was there the whole way through. We had Gettysburg, obviously, you know, is a very historic town, and every Memorial Day, the students would be asked to walk in the Memorial Day parade. And as you can see, I'm going to show you where I was, and there's a reason why I'm always there, right there beside the teacher. It seemed like I needed to be corralled. What can I say? But we would pick flowers from our grandparents' yards or from our own yards, and we would carry them. And we would march in this Memorial Day parade, and they still do it to this day. But as you walk along, you have these flowers, you have the flags, and we finally get to the Gettysburg National Cemetery. And as you can see, during taps, whoops, I'm so sorry. I know better than that, Skip. Sorry about that. All right, wrong one. Okay. Here we are at the National Cemetery, and when taps is being played, the students we are walking through these gray circular stones, and we're putting flowers down for every place that has a flag. And as a little girl, I remember walking and thinking, oh, here's a name of someone, and there's a name, and then no names. There were so many of these gray stones that had people buried and no names were on them. Little did I realize that that would come back to unnerve me, so to speak, after the Vietnam War. I always wanted to be a nurse. I can remember taking care of my great-grandmother with my grandmother, and my great-grandmother would just pinch my cheeks and say, you're going to be a great nurse. And I was a candy striper in high school, and when I graduated from high school, I went to a 3-year nursing school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My junior year of nursing school, I was thinking, you know, I do not want to go back to Gettysburg to live the rest of my life. Harrisburg did not appeal to me at all. So I was listening to an upperclassman talk about the Army Student Nurse Program. My ears just kind of perked up, I thought. So I asked her about it. I said, tell me more. She said, not only will you get the GI Bill when you want to go on to get your degree, but you get to travel. She says you get to wear a uniform, and the best thing is you get $300 a month your senior year of nursing school. And back then, that was a lot of money. So I remember going home and talking to my mom and dad. Now, I'm the middle of 3 girls. So when my dad had his 3 girls, he was like, thank God nobody has to go to war. So he's telling me this. I said, Daddy, I'm not going to war. I just want to join the Army nurse program, you know? And he said, well, let's have someone come talk to us. So the Army sent a drop-dead gorgeous Army recruiter to our house. And I think my dad just sat there with his eyes coming out of him because, first of all, but she was so honest. She told it exactly the way it was going to be. She didn't mince words. One of the things she said was, there's a 95% chance she'll go to Vietnam. I think that went right over my head. I thought, I'm not going to go into war. I'm just going to go and work for the Army, you know. I don't know. I was very, very naive, obviously. But so I graduated from nursing school, and then I took a 3-month intensive care coronary care course just to advance my knowledge, took my boards, and then on January 6th, 1970, that is me being sworn in as a 2nd lieutenant. The next day I left for Fort Sam Houston. And Fort Sam Houston is where all of the medical corps will have their basic training. It's 6 weeks long. I get there, I know no one, but I met 2 wonderful, wonderful friends that are still great friends with me today, as many of you experienced with your Vietnam veterans, excuse me. Obviously, we learned how to march. I loved marching. I loved the music, and I was in the most awful platoon ever because we had to repeat things because my platoon didn't know the right foot from the left, and that upset me, but oh well. I learned how to wear the insignia. I learned how to salute. I learned all of the Army protocol that was going to get me through the 2 years. We even went out to Camp Bullis where we had to learn field nursing protocol, wearing gas masks and things like that. So it was pretty intense. The very last week, the 5th week, you get this dream sheet, and I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. It gives you the name of the hospitals in stateside that you could choose for where you want to go. Now, it was a dream sheet. But when I looked over it, at first I thought, oh, Hawaii sounds good. Then I thought, no, I don't want to do that yet. So I chose Walter Reed because it was close to Gettysburg, but enough far away from my parents. But I loved D.C. I just thought it was great. So I was sent to D.C., and but before I got there, I had dress blues on. So, you know, this is what we were wearing, obviously, in our country right now. And I wore a white uniform for working, so it was, you know, pretty much like civilian working, except you don't just work 7 to 3. You work until the work gets done, which all of you remember that, I'm sure. So, but I loved Walter Reed. Walter Reed, I was there for 9 months. I worked in the ICU and recovery room there. I learned so much so fast. You know, I was 21 years old, and your brain is just like a sponge when you get to learn so much. And then, as fate had it, I got orders for Vietnam in November. And I remember crying for 3 days because I didn't think it was going to happen to me. Because I worked with Walter Reed Army Institute of Nursing people that wanted to go, and they didn't get orders, but I did. So, but unfortunately, that's the way it happened. So, November the 20th, 1970, my roommate and I got orders and were sent to Vietnam. So here you can see the split picture. Quy Nhon is on the South China Sea. It was in Tu Quoc, and it was at the 67th evac, which difference, and I'm sure all of you know this, when I give these talks, I say it wasn't the MASH unit. I was not Hot Lips, okay? But the MASH was Mobile Surgical Hospital, and you pick up and you went to where they needed you. This hospital was a stationary hospital as an evacuation. You can see here, here's Quy Nhon. I'm sorry, am I talking too close to that? It's just, okay. There's Quy Nhon, and that's where I was. If you look at this map very carefully, you can see the stars around certain places. Those were where the hospitals were. In Vietnam, every single hospital was on the front line. There was no such place that was safe. So just remember that, because nurses thought they were like if you've ever read the book The Women, which I'm sure many of you have, Frankie thought she was going to be in a white uniform and be safe, and that's not the way it was. So I loved, when I got there, the beauty of the country was phenomenal. It kind of reminds you of Hawaii in a way. But this is, the next picture shows you where I worked. This is the 67th evac hospital. See the red crosses? That's because of the Geneva Convention, that we had to have those where the patients were. To me, it was more like, am I messing something up? Oh, sorry. To me, it was more like, sorry. What I want to say, rifle practice in a way, because you could see the M14 tracers go over our hospital a lot at night, which was not very comforting. But you will also see the airfield, and down here were our helicopters. Our dust-off pilots landed with our patients. We have a gentleman here that after we left, Rod, what's your friend's name? Yes, sir. What's your friend? Chuck. Chuck came in after I left, and he took my hooch, he said. But this is where the nurses were, this little rectangle there, okay? And then the doctors were right here. And the reason I point that out is because in one of my stories, it's very significant. So the next one is just thanks to a helicopter pilot. It's the side view of our hospital. So you can see we were a 2-story hospital, concrete. We did have windows, as you can see up here. And there is Vung Chu Mountain, and that's significant also for me. And then the ocean was over here. But the village was right here at the base of the mountain, okay? The Quonset huts, which I'm sure many of you know, Quonset huts are like chicken coops, and we had many of the chicken coops for some of our buildings. Whoops, I'm sorry. One of the things that I want to really make sure you know, are there any dust-off pilots in here? Any helicopter pilots? Okay, thank you. I want to tell you what, without you guys and without the dust-offs, many of us would not see the friends that we had as veterans. They were the emergency casualty helicopters. And the medics flew with them, and they would get the patients when the attacks were kind of quiet. I'm sorry. That's all right. At least I'm not touching it and making it happen. So the medics in the field were phenomenal. They would start the IVs, they would get the airways going, they would try as much as they could to get the blood from going all over the place. And the helicopter pilots, when you think about what they had to wait for, and the fellows would pop the smoke to find out what color it was safe to go in and whatever, so that the BC wouldn't be hitting on them. The tension and the intensity of their jobs was incredible. And if the fellows were wounded and they got on these helicopters, they knew that there was a chance that they were going to make it. And so, because they could be at our hospitals within 10 to 20 minutes, which is phenomenal. We consider in World War I and World War II, that was not happening at all. When the soldiers, this is what the dust-off helicopters look like with the Red Cross. These are medics getting the patients into the helicopter, and it's all hands on deck when they get into the hospital area. We go out, we get them, we bring them into R&E, which is the emergency room. We use our critical thinking skills, which were absolutely intense at that point. We learned how to listen, how to look at a patient and talk with them if they could talk, to figure out what we needed to do first. It sure is different today with computers, because I get really upset with the fact that the nurses are sitting there looking at the computer asking the questions instead of looking at the patient. We did not do that. We looked at our patients. We felt for them. The visual assessments were absolutely mandatory to be spot on so that we could figure out and tell the doctors what was happening here. Our patients were the 18 to 30-year-old patients. We had allied troops. We had the ARVNs, which you all know, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. We also took care of the civilians, and we also took care of the POWs and the MBAs. BC and MBAs. So this is a photo of the recovery room that I worked in. It's in a Quonset hut, and it is, you can see how many beds there are. So when we had mass casualties, almost all the beds were full. So it was a pretty intense area. I'm so sorry, I don't know what I'm doing here. So one of the things I want to point out is that, whoops, jeez, sorry. My fingers are, there we go. Okay, this area right here is the door between the recovery room and the ICU. It's all the time. The metal desk is right here, and that's where our nurses did all of our charting. But the recovery room and the ICU and OR were like in a big circle type thing, so that we always could get somewhere fast. The next view is, okay, this is our ICU. Now this is half of the unit itself. The ICU, we could hold up to 20 to 30 patients if necessary, but 20 was usually the 20 beds is what we had. So what you're looking at is half of our building, and you've got the nurses station here, you've got the doors intact, and I say this because you're going to see something different, and all of our beds lined here. Usually we kept the Vietnamese over here so that they could talk to themselves or talk with other people. And then the POWs were out here in this room by themselves. And then, can you hear that? Oh, I'm sorry. Just go to the microphone more. Does that help? May I hold it? There. Sorry. If I had known that earlier, you wouldn't have been blind or a thing. So, okay. So this is our ICU. Okay. We had 8 nurses for ICU. We worked 6 days a week, 12-hour days. On mass cows, we would work anywhere from 14 to 16 hours, sometimes 18, depending on how many patients we had. I got in country in November. I've been there about 6 weeks, and I'm going to work at night, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, things haven't been too bad. It's been a little quiet. That's all right. We still have patients. Complacency is the absolute worst thing that can happen when you're in a war zone. And that night, about 0200, I had taken my last patient from the recovery room into the ICU. I told the nurses, there were 2 other nurses with me, I said, I'll be right back. I said, I'm just going to go clean up recovery and I'll be right in. at 02:20, the loudest explosion I have ever heard in my life. I thought a bomb dropped next door. I thought the doctors were dead. The lights were out. I'm in recovery room hiding under that metal desk I told you about. I didn't want to leave. I prayed, I was praying, I was shaking. This is all like in split seconds. And then finally I realized I can't be here. I need to get to ICU. So I grabbed my flak jacket and my helmet, which never got on. We got there. None of the three of us had experienced anything like this before. So we immediately, though, knew we had to protect our guys. Our guys is why we were there. So we lifted up our patients, put them on cots, shoved them under the beds, and went and got the empty mattresses from other beds and put them around. The emergency lighting came on eventually, but this is what it looked like. It looked like a tornado hit our unit. The doors are off, the windows are blown out, the patients are under the beds. That's me sitting on an empty bed. That's Joanne laying her head down just to try to figure out what we're going to do next, I think. We did have some civilians, citizens over here on the right, and we had one POW. The POW had been with us for a few days. It took 5 of us to take care of him, 2 nurses and 3 corpsmen, just to even turn him. He had stepped on a tripped a landmine and was in a body cast from his neck to his ankles. So one other nurse and myself picked him up, put him on a cot, and shoved him under the bed. So adrenaline is amazing when you need to get things done. In fact, we didn't even realize we had done it until after we were sitting there in the room and saying, "Who did Charlie?" And then we realized it was just one other nurse and myself. The explosion came from 5,000 tons of ammunition that the VC blew up from the Arvin ammunition capacity in the Vung Chu Mountain, which was a mile from our hospital. So it affected every single unit of our hospital with the windows blown out. There was tape on it, like for hurricane taping, you know, so at least it wasn't big shards that came out on our patients. That night, I have never forgotten. I thought we were being overrun. It's one of those things when you go home and you have nightmares. That was one of my nightmares. Okay. So one of our patients that night had a trach. A trach is a breathing tube in the mouth, in the neck, and you have to suction out the fluids so that they can breathe. And once you do that, you have to ambu them or have a breathing bag for them so that they get the oxygen that they need. So I am the nurse under the bed suctioning this soldier out, and that's the suction machine right there on the floor. Joanne is doing the ambu. So you can see that we had to pull the mattress down, suction this poor kid, and then take care of him after that. Okay, so that was the first night that I remember thinking I will never be complacent again. So, but mass cows did happen to us. Another one happened in April, and one of the troops got ambushed at the Onke Pass. And so we had about, I think it was like anywhere from 18 to 20 kids come in at one time. So I was in the recovery room along with another seasoned nurse. A seasoned nurse is one, obviously, that was there a little bit longer than I. And we had a 19-year-old guy that came in, and his left arm was amputated at the shoulder, and his right arm was amputated from the elbow down. Both eyes were bandaged. And when he started to wake up, and he was about a 6-foot-tall guy, big guy, he would raise his chest up and go, "Nurse, I can't put my arms down. I can't put my arms down." And he was my patient. And I went over and I called him by name and I said, "It's okay." I said, "You're in a hospital right now. What happened to me?" And so I told him about being Okay, sorry. I told him what happened, that they were attacked. And he said, he said, "This is just great." He said, "Why can't I see?" And I said, well, your one eye got damaged and the other eye is bandaged to protect it. And I have to keep you calm. So I'm going to give you some pain medicine. I don't have any pain. And these, I'll tell you what, the kids I took care of, they were so stoic. They were more worried about their fellows than they were about themselves. The camaraderie that is shown in the Corps is just amazing. So I kept talking to him, found out that he had just been married, and they had spent their honeymoon, and then he got shipped out. So I thought I calmed him down, and it didn't help. So finally I said, all right, I said to the nurse, I'm going to have to tell him what's wrong with him. And the doctors did not want us to do that because we were supposed to keep him calm. I said, well, we're not keeping him calm by not letting him know. So I finally told him about what happened with his arms. And then he said, well, how come I can't see? And I told him, I said, well, we have your eyes bandaged so that the good eye is resting. He said, what do you mean the good eye? I said, well, the other eye you will not be able to see out of. And he yelled, now I will be selling pencils the rest of my life. And I sat down beside him and put my hand on his chest. And I said, no, you won't. We're going to get you through this. You are at the 67th evac. You will be in ICU for about 14 days. Then we're going to get you out to, we'll evac you to probably Japan for more rehab and then back to the States. He said, you promise? I said, we will get you through this. And sure enough, he was with us 14 days. Every day, one of us nurses sat down and wrote a letter to his wife. His wife's letter somehow got to him. We would sit and read it to him. The day he was evac, we put balloons around him. And he got back, he did go to Japan, and then about 3 months, I think it was about 3 to 4 months later, we get a letter, Ward 5, 67th evac hospital nurses. And here he was, his wife wrote us a letter thanking us for taking care of him. And, we never knew what happened to the guys after they left us. Here we were, we finally heard. And here he was thinking of us and supporting us. And again, the camaraderie of the Corps is so strong. It was just one of those things that we really, really loved. I will show you in this next picture, this is what the recovery room looked like after a mass cow. The doctor sitting right here was Dr. Wayne Dickinson. He was the doctor who taught me so much. The doctors, I will have to say, taught us how to do things that we never would have known in the States. Because the guys didn't have arms, we had to learn how to do subclavians and jugulars to get IV fluids and blood into these kids fast. They taught us how to actually put in a chest tube and do a trach. So these were things that we were not allowed to do when we came back. So why Frankie did it in the book is beyond me, because we were not allowed to do that. But one of the things I want to point out is that Wayne died about 2 years ago. But he did 15 trips back to Vietnam to take care of children that needed surgery, like with cleft lips and things like that. So he just felt so strongly for the Vietnamese people that they were treated so poorly through war that he wanted to give back. The guy was a blessing. Okay, I know you all know Bob Hope. Many of you may have been fortunate enough to get to see him. Well, we were not fortunate enough. Our unit was too small and too probably hot an area that we couldn't protect him well enough. So what did they do? They sent Miss America and Phyllis George. And I want to tell you, what a drop-dead gorgeous woman this is. So I was finally working days, and it was about 10 hours into my shift, and she comes through with her court. And they looked gorgeous. They had on beautiful dresses. Their hair was great. Their makeup was perfect. And here we were 10 hours into our shifts wearing our fatigues and boots, So one of the soldiers I was taking care of had a double amputee again, but these are below the elbows, and he couldn't hold himself up. So I'm holding him up. And I said, are you ready to see Miss America? He goes, amen. So she comes over and talks with him and gives him the biggest smiles. And she talked with him for about 10 minutes. I know, because my arms were getting tired holding him. And but as she left, I laid this kid down. And I looked at him and said, wouldn't it be great if us nurses could look like that? And he looked at me and he said, they don't hold a candle to what you mean to us and what you look like. And I leaned down and I kissed him on his forehead. And I said, I will never forget you, because here you are supporting me when I'm supposed to be supporting you. And I turned around and this picture was taken of me. So I don't know exactly what I was thinking, but that was me after 10 hours of working. So anyways. So, one of the really sad things of war is that it's not just our soldiers getting hurt, but children get wounded. One of the things that we found, the VC had no respect for anybody. They would trick kids into holding grenades, or they would use women as bait, so to speak, and even older people. The children were the hardest to really accept because they didn't have any idea what was going on. In this next picture, this little guy found a flare. Now, I know you all know what flares are, but inside a flare, flares, for those of you who don't know, are like fireworks. But it's a firework that stays like bright white for 5 minutes. And they use it over compounds to make sure that enemies are not coming in through the barbed wires and things. Well, this little kid found a flare that was a dud. And he decided to play with it. They didn't have toys. So he opened it up, and the phosphorus burned him. And unfortunately, no matter how hard you scrub, the phosphorus still gets into the system, and it will affect all the electrolytes, especially potassium. And this little kid had a cardiac arrest, and we could not revive him at all. But his mom is with him, and Joanne is right there taking care of him. The white cream we used back then was sulfamyelin for the burns of the phosphorus. The little guy here is not real happy with me, but he had shrapnel in his belly and up into his chest, so he had tubes everywhere and would keep thrashing around, moving the tubes around. So I had to kind of get them in straight line. One of the things on our days off that we would do is we would do MedCap missions. Now, in the book, The Women, Frankie went to an orphanage, okay? We had closest to us a leprosarium. Now, the leprosy is ugly. I don't know if any of you got to see it, but it attacks the cartilage and also of the nerves. So when you're looking at someone that has it, they don't have a nose. They only have the little nasal holes in them. Their fingers are like nubbins, and the same thing happens to their toes. So it kind of starts on the extremities and works in. Well, with the toes, they can get gangrene. And so then they have to be amputated. So the leprosarium was run by the French nuns, who were wonderful, wonderful people to accept these people that were being banned from their villages. And they would have these people come in, help them to take care of the land, because it was gorgeous what they had. But then when they needed surgery, if they needed help, we were called to do that. So that's me. I wasn't doing anything but observing, okay? This is my very dearest Army nurse friend, Laura, who was an OR nurse for years. And that's Barry Silverman, who is a physician that I think he still lives in Florida, if I'm not right. But we were doing an amputation of the foot here because of gangrene. The French nuns then gave us a phenomenal French meal instead of going back to the food, if that's what you want to call it, at 67th. So, but about 8 months into country, I started getting really uptight, and I wasn't sleeping well. Laura, my very dearest friend, left because she had already completed her year. My roommate, Diane, got to leave in June because her brother was coming into country, and they wouldn't have brother and sister in the country at the time. So she got to leave. So I was kind of by myself, even though I had friends. But there are certain people that you just are drawn to and you're very, very close friends with. So my friends were not there. And I was the seasoned nurse in ICU and recovery. So I was getting all these newbies In the book, they called them FNGs, and they would, sorry about that, fellas, but that's the book. Not me, that's the book. And they couldn't do things fast enough for me. You know, it'd be like a mother trying to teach a child how to tie a shoe when she had to get going. She said, here, I'll just do it myself. That's kind of where I was. I was uptight, I was not sleeping well, and I finally went to the chief nurse and I said, I need a change. And I said, I'm not doing well. She said, oh, but Lieutenant, you are doing great. Think of this. I said, no, you don't understand. I am not great. I'm very impatient. I'm not sleeping. She says, okay, I get it. And she said, I'm going to put you in the orthopedic ward for a month, and then your last 3 months, you can be in recovery, or excuse me, in the emergency room. I said, that would be perfect. So what you're going to see here is the orthopedic ward. Now look how close the beds are. I mean, if any of you are in hospital administration, Joint Commission would have a fit. But the wonderful part of this was I could talk to these guys, you know, and I knew that they would leave, and there's a possibility that they would get back in country. But they were all there supporting every single one of them and able to talk. ICU was a rare talking patient, okay? So the last 3 months when I was in ER, there was no mass cows, which was a blessing, a real blessing. But I did get the Bronze Star. And I got it for meritorious service, and also with me teaching the other nurses and things like that. I didn't tell anybody I got a Bronze Star. It was on the front page of the Gettysburg Times. But other than that, I didn't tell anybody. My friends didn't get them. Why should I get them? When I felt that all of us nurses at least deserved it. But I had a great colonel over me, and she decided that I deserved it. I think some of my friends did not have the relationship with their higher-ups, but I don't know. Anyways, this was very, very special to me. I just was so humbled, and I just didn't tell people about it, that's all. So, finally, I get to go home, my freedom bird. And you can see, I've got, this is how I went home. I went home in my fatigues and my combat boots. I was the only woman on the flight, which was delightful because I'll tell you what, when you get there and we leave Vietnam, the cheering going on was like being at an Alabama football game or a UGA football game. Sorry, I should have said UGA first. Sorry about that. So, but, I mean, the relief that you're going home was absolutely incredible, which I know I share that with all of you. The anxieties, I didn't, I thought, oh, I've been in war, but I thought I was okay. I really thought I was okay. But I did know to take a dress along in my carry-on, because when I got to Fort Lewis, because I ETS'd and DEROS'd at the same time, because I only had 6 weeks left to do my 2 years service. And no, I was not going to sign up again. So, but I knew to change to a dress because Laura got home and she was spit upon. And, we're nurses. We don't think about that. And yet, it happened to her, and I know it has happened to probably some of you. So I wore my civilian clothes. I also will have to say that when I came back into civilian life, it was November. I had just turned 22, so I was turning 23 when I got home. So that whole year being 22 was incredible year. Thanksgiving came. I had family around me. I didn't get to talk much about Vietnam. Nobody asked me. My dad said, do you want to talk about it? I said, Dad, not right now. And that was it. Okay? So the constant dream or nightmare that I had was being overrun, and it was from that January 6, 1970. I don't have that problem anymore, but I do have the problem with sounds and sudden motions that I'm not aware of. In fact, I think I shared one with Art and Carol last night. About 3 years ago, my husband walks in the house. I did not know he was there. And he opened the door like this, and I screamed and went over and started hitting him on his chest. Now, this is 50-some years later. And I said, David, don't ever come into the house like that with me not knowing you're here. So I was not in the jungle fighting. And when I came home and still had some of these anxieties, all I could think of was the poor kids that were in the field all the time and being shot at and never knowing if they were going to live the next day. I never had that feeling that I wasn't going to live the next day. So I kind of capsulated everything into my body and felt like, okay, what I'm doing. I did go to a meeting, but I was not accepted into the meeting because it was for guys. So, things in the book of the women, the history part of it is true. Then the fiction is kind of bizarre. Now, I will tell you, I think I'm probably running late here, so I'll move along. The wall, oh my gosh. It was dedicated in 1982, okay? My husband said, do you want to go? I went, I'm not ready for that. Plus, the fact I had little kids. And I said, no, I'm not ready. But when my son's 6th grade class decided to go to D.C., I was one of the chaperones. We got to the wall, and I looked at Todd, and I said, Todd, go with your classmates. I have to do this by myself. And I know you all have been there. But when it starts out so small to the ground and it keeps going up, and you see all these letters of names of people, kids that didn't make it home. And I thought about Gettysburg. Here were names and no graves, and those were graves and no names. And it hit me so hard that we didn't bring so many kids back. And it took me a while to get over that, a lot. In fact, sometimes I don't know if I am over it. But the next thing that happened was in 1993, Diane Carlson Evans made this memorial available to all of us nurses. It was dedicated on Veterans Day of November the 11th. Laura and I decided that we were going to go. No husbands, no kids. Just the two of us. We had no idea if we were going to see anybody else we knew. We got there and we did get to see other people that we worked with. Not only that, but as we were walking from the Smithsonian down to the Lincoln Memorial, we were carrying a sign, 67th Evac Hospital, and all of us nurses signed it. There were thousands and thousands of Vietnam veterans there shouting, thank you, thank you, thank you, and had signs with nurses' names on them that took care of them. Well, it was overwhelming. I never thought I needed to hear the words thank you for something that we had done 20 years before. And that was the beginning of the healing for many of us. And the fact then, we still really weren't talking about it, but I got to start talking about it. In fact, my husband and I were married 20 years at that point. I got hugged and kissed more that 20 years than in the 20 years we've been married. I told him that too, so he knows that. So anyways, but going on, as it was mentioned that I was inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. I will have to tell you, it's the most humbling thing ever for me. I'm so honored. But it's hard to believe that someone would choose me because I did what I really wanted to do, and it's just wonderful that I feel that I'm doing this for other nurses. So the other picture here I love because this young kid that was holding my picture said, oh, that was only about 20 years ago, wasn't it? I said, you're in my photo book. So anyways, okay. So I always put this up here because my youngest granddaughter, who's now a junior in high school, will be a junior in high school, made this for Veterans Day for me. But being an Army nurse was the absolute best career choice I ever made. The high degree of professionalism, camaraderie was key to the esprit de corps. I am so proud that I've been able to serve my country. Each vet has his or her own story. Many have written books. I have not written any books. I am in some books. Aren't I, Tom Ross? Oh, thank you, Tom. So I do talk I do many of these talks. Basically, since the women came out, young people want to know about what we did. So if you haven't read Kristen Hanna's book, The Women, you need to read it. Because I have talked to 40 book clubs, just enlightening people about what we all went through. And not just what I went through, but what you all went through. So I will close in saying, Calvin Coolidge said, "The nation which forgets its defenders will itself be forgotten." So on Memorial Day, when I gave the talk, I said, all of the veterans that have passed before us, with our hearts to them, we will never forget them. But I want to thank you for having me. And again, this is a healing experience for me, so thank you. Thank you.
Don't go away. Don't go away. Ginny, thank you very much for truly moving words. Carol and I had the opportunity to have dinner with Ginny last night, and so some of what she told us last night we kind of slept on, and now she's reinforced it today, and I'm sure all of you, it's really wonderful, interesting, and heartwarming to see what it was like on the other side of combat, meaning what happened, not when we were out there beating the bush or whatever we were doing, but rather what was behind us to support us. So on behalf of the Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association, thank you, number one. This is our challenge coin. It can be made into a beautiful brooch or necklace.
Thank you.
And as well.
Wonderful, the book two.
Book two,
I
yes.
have read book one.
I knew Ginny had read book one, so book two is a presentation, and we've got a little time for questions and answers, so anybody has one, please raise your hand. Hang on.
Jenny, I met you 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an FM corpsman, okay? And when it comes to angels, the nursing squad was the angels. I was in combat, and I was the first line of defense, but you were the final line. I thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, Jenny. I really appreciate what you said about the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, and you're so well deserved to be there. Out of the 191 inductees of the Hall of Fame since 2013, there are only 8 women, and that is not by any kind of design. It's just by the number of people that we receive nominations for. But every one of them, you're the second nurse, by the way, that's in the Hall of Fame. And I just want to say thank you. You're such a wonderful representative of our state, of our nation, of our veterans, in the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you, Rick.
I'm Steve Presser, and I was a combat medic in Vietnam. And when you talked about putting them, what's wrong? You talked about, and you showed a picture of medics putting putting the wounded. I did that many times. And the guys would ask me, how's so-and-so? Is he going to be okay? But we never knew. And that was hard to go through that, not knowing what happened to them, because we did have strong bonds. And believe me, you certainly are deserving of that, the honor you got, and I appreciate your speech very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jenny, I was lucky enough to have an Army nurse help me out when I was hit. There was one thing you said today that was wrong, though.
Uh-oh.
You said that Miss America came in there, and she looked all beautiful. Compared to you girls, you were absolutely beautiful, and you were prettier than Miss America because you did more than just wear a pretty dress.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Let me check, see, be sure. Clear. I spent spent about 7 days, maybe 9 days in a hospital in the Saigon area. Can't remember the name of it. Wasn't wounded. I hate to admit this, but I had an ingrown toenail.
That hurts.
Here's the catcher. It refused to heal. It stayed infected horribly. So put me in the hospital, get me off that dirt, get me in someplace halfway sanitary. And during the days I was in there, I learned more about our soldiers, talking to the guys around me. And it was absolutely wonderful. I didn't even know I had a problem on the foot. But those guys taught me more about the United States Army soldier and a few Air Force than I had ever learned in ROTC, field manuals, War College, anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you.
I grew up in Harrisburg, and
Sorry what I said about Harrisburg.
well, that's why I'm here rather than in Harrisburg. So I am in complete agreement with you. My high school squeeze went to Polyclinic Nursing School. Is that where you went?
No, I was at Harrisburg Hospital.
Okay.
Polly was the competitor.
Poly is where I was born, and it's long closed. Harrisburg is still going strong. I lived for the last half of my tour at the Massachusetts BOQ in Saigon next to the 3rd Field Hospital. And I had the opportunity to be a stretcher bearer on many occasions and ran into people like you. And I tell you, there's just not enough we can say to thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Hi there. I don't know what I'm going to say, but I have been very moved by your presentation, and I agree with that gentleman. You are just as beautiful as Miss America still are. I'm going to shoot my friend John Butler for having me here and introducing me to this group. This is my son, and I got real emotional during your talk. The saddest day of my life was the day I went to Graves registration and identified the bodies of 3 of the guys that served under me. I was a 1st lieutenant platoon leader in the I Corps, and I was not in the field, and those were the first guys that I lost. I had gone back to the rear because I had a sprained ankle. And when I looked at those guys, it just broke my heart. I don't know about other guys that served in Vietnam. It's like I had this shell around me. It was as if I couldn't feel anything. And only a few years later, after I started going to reunions with my company, that I started reminiscing about my tour of duty. When Memorial Day comes, it's a big holiday in our nation, and people go to the beach and have all kind of, for me, it's a solemn day because I remember all of the people who've given their lives for the freedom that we have in this great nation. What a blessing that is, and I just want to thank you for your service and for the wonderful job that you folks did, and all the wonderful nurses. And I know there's so many people, and one of the most heartbreaking things to me is all the lives that were lost in this conflict, not just American lives, but Vietnamese lives. So it's just been tragic, and I really thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hugh, I blame John too for inviting me here. I met Hugh, I met John last meeting, but I wanted to say thank you so much from my perspective. I lived in an orphanage at Cam Ranh Bay, and there was a base there. whenever one of our children would be sick, the nurses would come and heal us. But also one big story I want to share with you. You brought back a lot of memories that I didn't expect. My brother was flown by helicopter from the orphanage because his arm was enlarged, and of course as a little child I didn't know what's going on with him. I just remember that there was a helicopter with a Red Cross on it. I took my brother and went away. And as his sister, I didn't know what happened. But soon after, they returned my brother, and he was all better. So, as an orphan, during the Vietnam War, we have a different perspective, but you have done an amazing job because God is giving you the gift of healing. You're not just a pretty face.
You're going to make me cry.
But I wanted to share with you from my perspective as orphan, and I represent Orphans of War, but that really hit home for me because you guys saved my brother. I was healthy, but I didn't know. But so thank you for your service. Thank you for the gift of healing, and not only just the soldiers, but little children, like you said. I just want to share that with you at the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for what you do.
Anybody got a tissue for Ginny? Bob, last comment, please.
Let me tell you something. You are one of us. We want your stories in our third book. And if you want to do your own book, I did Lou Eisenbrandt's Vietnam Nurse. I give good deal to Vietnam nurses because you saved so many of us, seriously. But contribute 1 or up to 5 stories, and they'll be in there. You're one of us.
Thank you.
Just a quick note. I have read The Women, and in the first part of the book, when she leaves to go to Vietnam, her mother says something that just stuck with me. Her mother wrote her a letter after she got to Vietnam, and she said, "It must be wonderful to be involved in something that matters so much." And I think that applies to all of us here.